Hey guys, so this is session number 2 of our book club or non-traditional book club, where you don't have to read the book to enjoy what we're doing. Um, so I'll just recap last week, but before I do that, I'll just kind of talk about again like the couple things you want to know for this. So I don't want to just like recap the book, like, oh, he said this, he said that, and whatever, and we can do that in the chat. But I kind of just want to just talk, and I kind of want to put my mind together with Martin Laird's mind, the author. And so I wanted to kind of be like a fluid thing, like a contemplative thing. So remember, if I pick up my phone and I'm reading his words. So I'm not going to say he said this or he said that. And if I don't have my phone up, then that means it's just me speaking. That way it just feels like one cohesive thing, but then you also, credits given where credits due and all that good stuff. So just to recap last week, we talked about how God is our ground, God is our center, God is the air that we breathe. And so, us experiencing God, and again, when we say God, we don't just mean dualistically or person to person in the way we normally think of that, although that's part of it. We're talking about a deeper level where there's no separation, there's no even distinction. Again, there is distinction when you go higher, but in the depths of love, there's just one love, there's just one thing. And so that's what we want to tap into. And so when we talk about God being our ground, that's the ground we're talking about. So if we're not tapped into that oneness love, that the one being of God that the Father, Son, and Spirit share, then we don't have a ground. And no wonder we have all these weird habits and we're selfish and all that stuff, because we've lost our grounding and we're scared and we're holding on to things so we don't fall into nothingness. So God is the air that we breathe. He is our center, and we don't want to suffocate. And so we need to lose our blindness to his reality. And that was the second point, was that it's it's not that our center or our ground or our air is like far, far away, and we contemplate to get there. It's already here, but we're blind to it. And it's the internal noise and movement that blind us to what's already here. Those are the things that take the air out of the room. Those are the things that cover what's already here. We talked about how God is like a light, and we put a lampshade and covers and blankets and jackets over the light. And so we don't need more light. We just need to remove the layers that are blocking the light. We need to remove the obsessiveness with our own thoughts and our own opinions and our feelings and our stories and our I. You have this I on the inside of you constantly going on and on and on and on, that Laird calls the wild hawk of the mind, which he took from someone else. And so we're so distracted with that we miss what we already have. The ironic thing is that this ego in our head and in our heart that's going on and on and on and on, the reason why it's doing that and the reason why we're into it so much is because we want love, we want God, we want wholeness. But if we would just let go of that, we would find that we're in wholeness. That's the ironic part. It's kind of like the comedic tragedy of the whole thing. It's the big joke of the whole thing, is that like we have what we want, but we don't know it, and so we have all these weird habits and things like that. So he also tapped into, what is it like to, delve and dive deep into that oneness love place. What is it like to dive into the being of God? What is it like to see God? Because we don't see God the way we see other things, because God is not a thing, he's a creator of things, right? So how do we see something or see someone who's not a thing, who's not an object? How do we do that? And how do we see ourselves? Because we're also not objects. We're made in his image. So we're just like God. And it's precisely because our deepest identity, grounding the personality, is hidden with Christ in God and beyond the grasp of comprehension. The experience of this ground identity that is one with God will register in our perception, if indeed it does register, as an experience of no particular thing, a great flowing abyss, a depthless depth. To those who know only the discursive mind, This may seem a death-dealing terror or spinning vertigo, but for those whose thinking mind has expanded into heart mind, and we'll talk about heart mind today, it is an encounter brimming over with the flow of vast open emptiness that is the ground of all. This no thing, this emptiness, is not an absence, but a superabundance. So it's not a darkness, it's a blinding light. That see that there's a difference. It's not an absence, but a superabundance. It is the fringe of love's cloak, Matthew 9:20. Psalms 138, verse 7 and 8. Where can I run from your love? Where can I flee from your presence? If I climb to the heavens, you are there. There too, if I lie in Sheol. So that's what we want to experience. That's the goal. That is who we really are, who God really is. That's where we find our completeness and our satisfaction and our wholeness. And so that's the one thing that we're missing, that again, it is our air, and we're suffocating emotionally, personally, psychologically, internally without our air. So it's just that we need to tap into that place. So the cool thing too is that, we've talked a lot about this with the group. It's that, we're not, he's talking about, again, the non-dual world or the being of God, but we're not just going there and leaving behind regular life, because regular life and the being of God they're connected. The being of God is connected to everything. Everything is an expression of the being of God. God didn't create all this stuff just so you can leave it behind and go meditate all day, right? No, you take meditation with you wherever you go. It's all connected. And actually, the people who are good at going into the non-dual love of God, the oneness love of God, they actually are better at doing the regular life stuff, and they actually enjoy the regular life stuff more. And they're just more grounded people, down to earth people, centered people, easygoing people. They have good habits and all that good stuff. And so it's not one or the other, it's both. It's connected. And so when we talk, as we talk today about today's topic, the wild hawk of the mind, we're not talking about it like, oh, okay, so I want to tap into the being of God, and so I've got to get rid of my mind, the wild hawk of the mind, get that out of here. No, there's a proper way to relate to your thinking mind that we're going to talk about. But your thinking mind, number one, is never going to go away, because again, it is part of creation. It's good. God calls creation good, but it's connected. And as R.S. Thomas puts it, the silence, so that's the being of God, the silence holds with its gloved hand the wild hawk of the mind. So even your thinking mind is held within the space and the atmosphere and the grip of silence, of the being of God, of that contemplative place of love. It's all one thing. And so I think one of the best examples that I've heard about this is the ocean and the wave. It's all water, right? But you can experience water as, like, if you go to the surface level, there's big waves, little waves, calm waves, chaotic waves. But what happens when you go deep in the water? It's there's stillness, there's peace, right? It's not hectic, but it's all the same thing. It's all one thing. It's all one body of water. It's all the waves and the depth in the water. It's made of the same H2O. And so we're not learning to leave behind the waves. We're learning to not be distracted by the waves. We're learning to not only focus on the waves. We can see the waves and enjoy the waves and not let the waves scare us. But that's only going to happen because we're also connected to the depths of the ocean. You see that you have a depth that you want to connect to in yourself. And so, yeah, you might still have wandering thoughts or emotions here or there, but they just appear like fireworks. It's no longer a fire that just destroys everything. It's just a firework in the immense sky that you are, because you're one with God, and God is infinite. God, nothing can contain him, nothing can hold him. It says in Hebrews that Jesus is going to literally wrap up all of the cosmos, all of reality, just like a blanket or like a garment, and fold it on up. I mean, God is bigger than as big gets. God is bigger than infinite. God, He's just so big. Well, you're made in God's image, so you have that as well. And so we can connect with that, but we can't connect with that when we keep focusing on the waves. And so what is it like to focus on the waves? Like, how do we make this practical? Like, what does that mean in our day-to-day life? Because when we focus on the waves, our life becomes a cocktail party of posturing masquerade in order to hide the anxiety and ignorance of who we truly are. So who are we truly? We're one with the being of God. We're one with the love of God. We are the wholeness that we seek, but we're distracted. Our mind is like a cocktail party. So I call it the pinball mind, right? Your mind is just going everywhere. Like you're thinking about like serious stuff, like real life relational stuff. And then you're also thinking about like work, and you're thinking about bills, and you're thinking about, oh, now I'm hungry. Like your mind is just like going everywhere. And you're just like a cat with the laser, just following it everywhere, right? I call that the pinball mind. And one term that you hear a lot in meditation circles is that I want to share with you is one-pointedness. Because one of the benefits and the things that we're trying to do when we meditate and contemplate is our mind that's doing this, like the cat with the laser pointer. We're trying to just get it to be a one pointed point in one direction. Just be with one thing. Simplify. And simplicity is a word you hear a lot, especially in Christian circles, of Christian meditation circles. Simplicity, simplicity, simplicity. Less is more, right? And when part of what they mean, they do mean oneness, right? Because to be simple means to get away all of the numerous things, right? Make it easier and easier and easier. But it also has to do with just your experience of your mind being simple. It's not going everywhere. And so that's one thing that we're trying to do. We're not trying, again, the wild hawk of the mind. We're not having our mind be just flying everywhere, going nutso. We really want to be grounded. We really want to just do one thing. And I don't want to talk too much about practice, because pretty much the next three chapters, I believe, are about practice. And so I don't kind of want to give things away. But just in theory, that's something to think about, is that, until next week, I mean, hopefully you're already trying to tap into contemplation and meditation and stuff. And if you need help, let us know. But, as you are mindful throughout your day, right? Just think about what your mind is doing. Think about where your attention is at. But the cool thing is, as soon as you're already trying to be mindful and you step into that, you're already kind of taking your mind and making it a one-pointed thing. You're already, because what's the one point that you're being aware of is your own mind. When you're aware of yourself, even if yourself is doing a couple things, there's a deeper simplicity, there's a deeper oneness, there's a deeper one-pointedness, there's a deeper focus that is just like, oh, I'm watching myself do this. And so that one watching of myself doing these other things, that's what you see, you're getting closer into that oneness, right? But I also do want to say that there is like a bad version of one-pointedness, even in obsession. And sometimes I've fallen for that trap where some people are not meditating, they're really just focusing on their problems really well. And so maybe, yeah, they're zoning out like, work stuff and pizza stuff and bills and whatever. And they're really good. They're concentrating, but it's not a contemplative concentration. Because in contemplation, we don't get caught up in the details. Because again, simplicity, right? Details is like too many things. And so some people, they end up when they meditate, they end up kind of falling for this trap of just like thinking about their problems, and they forget that they're meditating. And so that's kind of like a caution that you want to be careful of. And Laird says it well. So he tells a story about this woman who, in her struggles, and he says she described her inner state as a series of internal videos that constantly played, in that she constantly watched. Her attention was routinely stolen by them. And so, in this example, this woman has these memories from her past. Her mom told her she was ugly. Her mom told her she had 2 left feet, and she happened to be this very attractive, wonderful dancer, but she couldn't see reality for what it was. I mean, number one, her reality is even deeper than that, but even on a surface level, like on a regular life level, she was not the things that her mom had told her, but she believed those things. And so she constantly had thoughts and emotions and stories in her head about that one truth that she knew, and she just played it in her head over and over. And Laird is good about explaining how what the ego does or what the mind does is it plays movies for us, and then what we do is we add commentary to those movies, and we kind of like focus too much on those movies. And so again, that's a bad version of one-pointedness that we don't want to do. It's a bad version and example of focus. So we want to focus, but it's not that. And these are real life things, and Laird's good about telling like real life stories, or I'm sure they're fake, but real life examples of things that we probably go through, because he's very practical. What is it that keeps us from realizing who we really are and who God really is? It's stuff like this, right? It's we all have these stories of things we've been through, and it's not just like conscious as well, it's also subconscious. And in the example of the girl who believes that she's ugly, he says all of this plays in her head even if she isn't watching the video and pressing rewind to watch it again. And so there's kind of like it's kind of like if this example of this girl who thinks she's ugly, like that's kind of like a movie that's always playing in her head. And so sometimes, like, yeah, the curtain covers the movie, and maybe she's busy doing other stuff, and so she's not paying too much attention to it, but the movie's still playing. And he says it better later on, but it's kind of like you can still hear some of the movie, you can still catch glimpses of some of the scenes of the movie, of her fears and things like that. And so it's not just that consciously we have these stories playing but that are blocking on the reality of God, but it's also subconsciously. But the cool thing is, when we can control the conscious, it goes into the subconscious. And when we can control our conscious focus, it also goes into our subconscious focus. So meditation takes us deeper than the conscious and subconscious cocktail party, than the conscious and subconscious waves. So that's the goal. It's to tap into the heart, or the heart mind, or what some saints called higher reason. So there was lower reason, which is just like regular thinking, and higher reason, which is this non-dual place. I've been calling it dualism and non-dualism. But to make it real simple, I mean, it's just the mind and the heart. And when we say heart, we don't mean emotions. We don't mean even the lovey-dovey feeling, which I love that feeling. I'm a very sentimental person, right? But that's not what Christian contemplatives and mystics say when they mean heart, because feelings come and go. So if God is love, does God come and go? Is God a feeling? No, it's deeper than that. It's broader than that. It's bigger than that. And our own awareness, our own interiority runs deeper than we realize. So we're going deeper than our emotions. We're going deeper than that kind of heart. If we turn within and see only noise, chaos, thinking, anxiety, what R.S. Thomas calls the mind's kingdom, then we have not seen deeply enough into the vast and expansive moors of human awareness. So it's in this deep place that the heart communes with God in a silent and direct way that the conceptual level of our mind does not. So some of you come from like the charismatic Pentecostal world, and in that world you talk about like praying in tongues, right? Or praying in the Spirit. And we talk about how, and that's all good, and sometimes I do that. So I'm not saying that's stupid, but what I'm trying to say is, what do we say we're doing? Oh, we're connecting with God, we're talking to God, and it's spiritual, so our mind doesn't even get it, right? So that's all good. And even Richard Rohr says that praying in tongues is actually contemplation. He actually has an article about that. He talks about great love, great love, great pain, and praying in tongues, right? These are ways that we can tap into the non-dual world. But what's even deeper than that? What's even deeper than praying in tongues? It's silence. And even when you're not silent, because when we say silence, we don't just mean the absence of noise, which is a point Laird makes over and over again, although that's part of it, that could be part of it, but there's just something deeper within you that's always happening. You and God are always interacting. You and God are always vibing. You and God are always, that frequency is always playing off each other, that the dance is always happening, and you're not even aware of it because it's just so deep. Deep in the ocean, there's life, there's things happening, whether you see it or not. Deep in your own heart, there's things happening. But nevertheless, there's these two worlds, the dual world and the non-dual world. And from my understanding, and I could be wrong about this, I'm like halfway there to being fully convinced, but I think that this is what the New Testament talks about when they talk about spirit and flesh. And a lot of people, when they talk about spirit, they think of like, oh, I went into like the fantasy realm, which again, I do believe is real, but and I see angels and I see energies and lights and all this stuff. But that's not what true spirit is, because again, God is not limited to those things either. And this is why a lot of Christian mystics and even non-Christian meditators, they warn people about these spiritual experiences, because people who meditate, yeah, some people do like end up having those kind of experiences, but that's just another roadblock. That's just another dualistic thing. When you go in the spirit and you see all this stuff that you see, good guys and bad guys, whatever, that's still just dualism. That's still just good and evil. That's the true spirit is beyond even that, because true spirit is beyond comprehension. So again, go back to those old videos of non-dualism. God is not limited to this spirit world that we've come up with, and that's where he's at. That's just another thing that we see, but God is seen in the unseen. God is known through unknowing, not through what we know. So whether it's the physical world or the spiritual world, which again, it's all good. Just like how I always say the physical world is good. Sure, the spiritual, if you're into that, I don't really do that, but that's great. Go for it. Christians, Buddhists, Hindus, there's a lot of guys who do that kind of stuff. But again, the ones that really know contemplation know like, oh, that's not it. That's just another fun thing to do in life, but that's not the deepest place. So when we say spirit and flesh, that's really what we're talking about. We're talking about non-dualism and dualism. So the wild hawk of the mind. I think one word that I really want to get in your mind, like a fundamental thing that like everyone should know. If you want to meditate, if you want to contemplate, it really has to do. I'm going to borrow from someone else. He says the essence of meditation is awareness, and that's like one of those one-liners that you just gotta like, the ABCs, like get in your head. Like if you don't know the ABCs, like what's wrong with you? Like how, that's just, you have to know. So, and Christian mystics say the same thing. So that was someone else who named Yangi Mingyur Rinpoche, who says the essence of meditation is awareness. Another way of saying awareness is attention. It really is all about attention. So when we talk about connecting to the being of God, or being connected to the waves of the ocean, the surface level stuff, our thoughts and our psychology, where's the pivot at? What's the controlling force here? It's all about attention. It's all about awareness. It's all about focus. What are you aware of? Are you aware of the waves? Or are you aware of the depths of the ocean? Excuse me. So it's because our attention is so completely riveted to what's playing on the big screen of our thinking mind, we can live completely unaware of the deeper ground of the heart that already communes with God, that knows only communion as branches know deeply the vine. John 15:5. The shifting of the attention from the objects of awareness to the silent vastness of the heart that is awareness itself will bring the thinking mind to silence. And I said that before, meditation, maybe it was last time, meditation at first, we're trying to just like, again, our multi-level, multi-surface, multi-everything mind, that's go pinball mind going everywhere. At first, we're just trying to we're trying to simplify it, calm it down, focus on one thing. We're trying to like control our thoughts in that sense, not control them like this, but just like let them relax on their own, right? But then we come to a place when we realize like we're not our thoughts, we're deeper than that. And when I say realize, I don't mean like I told you, I mean like for yourself, you see it. And then you can learn to kind of lean into that realization, and thoughts just turn off like that, right? And that's what he's saying. He says, uh, When we turn to awareness itself, it will bring the thinking mind to silence. And so I want to talk about awareness, especially because Laird, that's like a big thing for him, which I really appreciate. It's one of the things that I like about him a lot, because that's kind of like what I've come to know. And so I kind of want to just share some thoughts on awareness. He's talked about it in the book so far that we've read, in the intro, and like he kind of like threads it all through everything. And I think and later in the book, especially like in his second book, which we might not get to, but he really focuses in on awareness and that whole thing. And so I want to read one thing. He says in the intro, he said, when Paul looks within and sees Christ, I do not suggest he sees Christ as an object of awareness, which just means something you look at. Okay, so it's not just like I'm here, Christ is there, and I'm looking at him, right? Because the two are one. He says the awareness itself is somehow about the presence of Christ in Paul. And so, in my own words, he's saying when Paul says, I don't live, but Christ lives in me, it's not just, which I do believe this, it's not just that like, Jesus Christ is living in him spiritually and I do believe that. But again, that's in the dualistic sense, which I love, appreciate, keep doing that stuff. Again, that's part of it. But the other side of the coin is, again, Christ is not limited to just some person named Jesus that we've come up with, right? That we perceive in a certain way. Christ is not just an object of awareness. Christ is awareness itself. And when you just say that point blank, I get it. For a lot of Christians, that sounds like, weird and like whatever. Like that's where'd you come up with that? Like, where's that scripture? And so I totally get that, right? And so for me, and again, this is what I just said is a Christian belief that comes from the Christian tradition. And when you read, and again, Laird is an expert who can pull from the Desert Fathers and the Catholic mystics and all these guys, right? Like, and he's able to pull, these thoughts from these guys in a cohesive way. And we don't cover all of that in these sessions because there's not enough time. You got to read them for yourself, right? So this is a Orthodox Christian thing. And when I say Orthodox, I don't mean Orthodox Church. I mean, it's a right thing to say that there's something about the reality of awareness and the reality of God being very, very connected. And so God, like Meister Eckhart, he said, I'm going to butcher it, but I'll say the right part. The eye with which God sees me is the same eye with which I see God. One awareness, one consciousness, one love, something, one awareness. It's one thing. And so here's what I'll say. Life, you experience life, you experience so many changes, so many things, so many ups, so many downs with your own life, with your own self, with your physical self. Like you grow and you change, your body's always changing, your beliefs are always changing. Everything in life is just change, beautiful change. So what is it that never changes through all of that? Think about it. You were born, and what were you? You were just aware. And then within that awareness and with that awareness, you were at a certain point in life. You were a baby and you were learning how to be a human, and you were learning this and learning that. And then you kept growing and growing and growing and growing, and you were changing and changing and changing. And through all of that, what's the one thing that never changed? It was your awareness, your consciousness. That's the one thing that never changed, never got fatter, never got skinnier, never got green, blue, yellow, or red, never got big, never got small. Your awareness has always been an absolute. It's always been its own thing. It's been naked, it's been bare, it hasn't been conditioned. It's just watching the whole show. It's just life itself. You're awake and you're like, whoa, and that's it. That's the one thing that the one constant that never changes. Really think about that. So again, this isn't like some weird, Eastern thing or something. It's just when Christians began to get silent and just be with God, this is what they realize. Like, okay, like I'm letting go of my beliefs about myself and life and even God. I'm letting go of this. I'm letting go of my emotions. I'm letting go of my stories. I'm letting go of my thoughts. I'm letting go. I'm letting go. I'm letting go. I'm letting go. Oh, but what did they get closer and closer with? What did they sink more and more into? Awareness itself, consciousness itself. It's not a weird thing. We can't let other people steal the word, consciousness or whatever. That's not a weird word. God made you conscious. Are you not conscious? It's a God thing. Do you not eat cheeseburgers because other people eat cheeseburgers? Like it's all good, right? So the more I let go of the things that are covering the reality of God. Remember the lampshade and the blankets and stuff, right? I'm letting go of all of these labels and whatever, right? Whatever. Again, I can't let go of my awareness. So there must be something to awareness being very intrinsic and fundamental to who I am, because that's never going to go away. If that goes away, then you're not even, are you alive? Like, are you here? Awareness and consciousness are like, it's like the skeleton of who you are. It's a basic element to the reality of life. And so the closer I get to just my bare awareness, that means that I'm doing a better job of not being so focused on like objects. Because when I'm focused on the object, excuse me, of awareness, well, then I'm forgetting about who I really am, the barest part of me, awareness. I'm so focused on things, on emotions, on thoughts. I'm like this. But as I let those things go and just be what's there, just be very practical. Go find out for yourself. It's just awareness. And so the Christian mystics teach, hey, the more and more you let go of this stuff, the more and more you're going to just like realize your own consciousness and awareness. That's a sign that you're letting go of the things that are blocking you from experiencing the love and being in persons and reality of God. So you're on the right path. You're doing the right thing. So I'm not saying, by the way, that God is just awareness or you are just awareness. Maybe that's true. Maybe that's not. I don't know. That's not what I'm just saying. But I think that the two things, God and awareness, or your true self, or your spirit, your being in awareness, which is one with God, those two things are very linked together. And in practical experience, the more we are with and one our bare naked awareness, the more we are with just awareness or only awareness, the closer we are to God. Or better put, the veil, the blindness, is as thin as it can be. And the more we are consumed in objects of awareness, the thicker the blindness is. And so that's why a lot of Christian mystics called this place unknowing, right? Like the book, The Cloud of Unknowing, right? That's where we got it from. It wasn't just from him, but we're not knowing things. I'm knowing, I'm seeing, I'm knowing. It's not about it's not about that. It's taking a step back and what's just there. Well, you're not knowing things the way we normally know things in a dualistic discursive way, but you're still knowing, you still know something, you know life itself, you just know, it's knowingness by itself. So when your mind isn't in the dualistic knowing mode, it's still aware, it's still knowing something. And what the Christian mystics teach is that when you're not knowing the creation of God or objects of awareness, then you're knowing God. When you're just in that place of awareness. And in experience, a better way of putting it, or another way of putting it, that the cloud of unknowing, talks about, is it says it like this. It's kind of like how I said that, like, I'm not saying God is awareness, but they're very linked. So the cloud of unknowing, he says, okay, when you stop knowing things and thinking about things, you're in this place called unknowing. And he says, I'm not saying that's God, but when you're in the place of unknowing, you're like really close to experiencing God and having experiences of God. So it's kind of like that. It's kind of like, I'm not saying that awareness is God, but the more you're in awareness, like that's what you're closer to God than you ever were before. And again, when I say closer to God, I don't mean that he's far away. I mean the blindness is less and less and less, because that's the only distance, is just the blindness. So we've talked about how you're not this label, you're not that pigeonhole, you're not this identity. So when you're not those things, when I'm not a male, a female, an American, a Korean, when I'm not a Republican or Democrat, when I'm not this identity or that identity, what's left? I'm still conscious, I'm still aware. Isn't that what it means to be alive, to experience? Not to be bound or limited by experience, but definitely to experience. And awareness is what knows your experiences. So there's something about that. There's something about awareness. So the last thing that I'll say, and again, this all comes from the book, the chapter, is that the wild hawk of the mind, we want to be less consumed with the wild hawk. It's still going to be there, but we just want to just be. So it's kind of like I used to be a photographer. I used to be a wedding photographer and other things, band photographer and whatever. I went to art school for photography. And so we all know with our little iPhone cameras or whatever you have, like we know you can focus on something close to you, and then the background can become blurry sometimes, right? Or with a low aperture, or you can focus on something else, right? So it's kind of like that. It's like we're so focused on objects of awareness, but when we let go of that focus, but we're still present, we're still aware. I'm still aware a cup is here. I'm still aware blinds are behind me, but I'm not like vividly aware of it. I'm aware of it, but I'm not so aware of these details. That's kind of like what contemplations is about. I'm not tapping into these details of these stories in my head. Oh yeah, so and so said this and that, and what does that mean? And they whatever. But I can still be aware. Oh, today I had a thought about how this upset me. There's a difference. So I can be one pointed and simple in myself, and I'm just here and I'm conscious, and thoughts come and thoughts go, and I'm aware of these things. And oh, then I felt sad for a minute, and then I felt happy. And okay, that's fine. That's good. That's different from someone who one thought comes and then they open that book and they read the whole book and they get so upset. That is what we're staying away from. That's the wild hawk of the mind. That's what keeps us from experiencing who we really are, who God really is. That's the wild hawk of the mind. So in the next few chapters, now this was all theory kind of stuff, right? I mean, I know it's speaking to you and it feels really good and I'm enjoying it too, but now we're actually going to like tap into like how to do this stuff. And again, you don't have to reach out to me if you want to get started, but that's the exciting part, is we actually get to step in and practice this stuff. So anyways, please don't hesitate to reach out, and we'll see you guys next time. Thanks. Bye.